Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Two things we talk about today, one in some bit of detail and one briefly. And true to our normal practice, what we talk about briefly comes first. So the first is about the Batla House encounter of 17 September of 2018. That we'll talk about briefly. And second is a more detailed discussion on the latest developments and very interesting and important developments on the Afghan peace process, because a letter that US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has written to Ashraf Ghani, the President of Afghanistan, quite uncharacteristically, its tone is uncharacteristic. It's also leaked from at the moment it arrived in Kabul. It's been leaked by the Afghan news agency Tolo, and it has many implications, including specifically for India and Turkey. So that we'll talk about in some detail. First of all, Batla House. Now this was not to be on our agenda today, but for a news flash that came in just a little while before I was sitting down to record this episode of Cut the Clatter. Now, Batla House, you would remember, is an incident that happened on September 17. It did not happen exactly like the John Abraham movie showed it to be. The real incident itself was quite dramatic and very controversial. In that incident, a group of Delhi police anti-terrorism specialists led by Mohan Chand Sharma, who was a star of Delhi police at that point, they raided a hideout or a home which they said was a hideout of Indian Mujahideen terrorists. In that encounter, two of the persons in that hideout were killed, and Inspector Mohan Chand Sharma himself was killed, and two more policemen were injured. Two of these alleged terrorists then escaped. Now they escaped, and this led to immediate controversy, as always happens with encounters. It was said that this encounter looked too unbelievable, too incredible, that if so many police people came, how did two of them die? How did the only one in the police team not wearing a bulletproof vest or flak jacket was Inspector Mohan Chand Sharma himself? How come with so much police there, two of the terrorists escaped? So the larger insinuation was that this was all a setup. It was a setup planned operation by Delhi police to kill some people, maybe get some medals. In the process, something went wrong and maybe a bullet strayed or something, and Inspector Sharma was hit. Otherwise, why would two people will be allowed to escape? Obviously, implication being that those who were allowed to escape were mixed up with the police, and that, quote unquote, confirmed the conspiracy theory that the whole thing was organized by the police. Now, this did not get much hawa when it began, but as time passed, it began to get more currency. This was a group of young people who had mostly come from district Azamgarh in Uttar Pradesh. After that, there were visits by opposition leaders to Azamgarh to reassure the people there. There were also statements from Digvijay Singh, supposedly on behalf of Sonia Gandhi, etc., that there was a great concern about how this encounter had taken place. And yet, in spite of this, all this was happening, in spite of the fact that the government of the day, that was the UPA government, because this happened in September 17, 2008. Once again, take yourself back to that time frame, that date frame, and you will figure out that this was just 2 months before the 26/11 attacks, the big attacks in Mumbai. Before that, these people who were caught in this encounter, two killed, two escaped, one policeman killed, they were considered responsible by Delhi police for having planned a whole series of terrorist activities in large parts of northern India, including Delhi, Jaipur, and many other places, all in northern India, in total taking the toll of 165 killed and 500 injured. This was a series of terror incidents which had scared, which had terrorized North India, in fact all of India, because it looked like nobody could catch them, and after these incidents, this group called Indian Mujahideen was taking responsibility. Now, after this, the same government of UPA gave India's highest gallantry award while not facing an external enemy, the Ashok Chakra. Ashok Chakra is the equivalent of Paramveer Chakra, the highest gallantry award in the armed forces, highest gallantry awards not facing a foreign enemy, that's Ashok Chakra. So Mohan Chand Sharma was awarded Ashok Chakra posthumously. So obviously the government of the day had made an assessment that this was a genuine encounter and he was killed in the line of duty. But a lot of insinuations were thrown after that, and these are polarized times. So people believe what they want to believe. So a lot of people said, no, this has to be a fake encounter. This was being set up by Delhi police and something went wrong. Who trusts the Delhi police, or for that matter, any police? This went wrong, and because it went wrong, their favorite inspector got killed. Government had to cover up for it by giving him a posthumous Ashok Chakra, so his family and the others and other policemen will also keep quiet. Now, some things happened today. What happened today, I told you there was a flash just shortly before I was sitting down to record this episode. The flash was that a Delhi trial court has now convicted a man called Ariz Khan, who is a BTech from STA Engineering College in Azamgarh. He has been convicted for killing Inspector Sharma, Inspector Mohan Chand Sharma. So with this conviction, one, the story ends, it gets a closure, and second, this whole idea and the, if I may say this to you, something that I strongly believe, the calumny thrown at Inspector Mohan Chand Sharma posthumously has now been settled because the court has ruled that he was killed by Ariz Khan. Now we can't tell you more about this because the court right now has only given us the verdict of guilty. The detailed verdict will come with the sentencing next Monday. So when that happens, we'll tell you more about it, because in that detailed order, I'm sure the judge would have then joined the ends. So we'll be able to talk about the full controversy. Now I will tell you what happened in this case. When the encounter took place, two of Ariz Khan's accomplices, that is Arif Amin and Muhammad Sajid, they were killed in the encounter. Muhammad Saif was arrested by the police. Two had escaped. One, as you know, was Ariz Khan and the other was Shehzad Ahmed. Shehzad Ahmed was later arrested. He had escaped at that point, but he was later arrested and put to trial in 2013. Shehzad Ahmed was also convicted. But the last one now, Ariz Khan, has been convicted. At this point, Ariz Khan escaped from India, went to Nepal, took a Nepali passport, started a restaurant or a dhaba, an eating place in Nepal, was also teaching some people there. Then in the course of time, this case tells us that he came in contact with Riaz Bhatkal, who was a well-known Indian Mujahideen operative, who then talked him into going to Saudi Arabia and re-establishing his contacts with the remnants of the Indian Mujahideen. In 2017, he was apparently coming back to India via Nepal to relaunch Indian Mujahideen. It was at that point that he was arrested. And why was he arrested? Because just a month earlier, the police had arrested another of his accomplices who probably spoke about him. This was a Simi person called Abdul Sohan. So it's possible that the police got his whereabouts or a clue to the fact that he was coming in from him and he was arrested. He's now been convicted. So once again, when the full order comes, we'll give you the full story. But in a way, this is a posthumous vindication 13 years after the event for Inspector Mohan Chand Sharma. This should now close this issue. Now from Batla House, we move on to Kabul and then to Washington. So an interesting thing happened last evening, Sunday evening. Suddenly I saw a highlight, a flash from Tolo News. Tolo is the Afghan news agency, very good news agency and very enterprising and very good journalists they have. Now that news agency put out the full text, in fact, a facsimile of a letter that US Secretary of State Antony Blinken had written to Afghan President Ashraf Ghani. Looks like he also sent some similar communication to the Afghan chairman, that is Abdullah Abdullah as well. Abdullah Abdullah is a more familiar figure in India because he keeps coming in for conferences, etc. Now, in this letter, Blinken said a bunch of things, but two stand out immediately, say from Indian point of view. First of all, he said, I think for the first time, and I searched, and Nainima Basu, my colleague who covers foreign affairs for us, she also searched, we haven't found another instance of America asking India formally to get involved in Afghan peace process. These have been suggestions on one-to-one talks and saying, you help the peace process, you be nice guys, you don't ruin things, we'll seek your good offices. But in this case, he has specifically asked for India also to be involved, and I will tell you the details of how. And second, again curiously, it looks like this letter indicates that Biden administration is bringing Turkey into the equation. So Turkey so far, which this government was expected not to like, because in some campaign rallies, meetings, talks in the run-up to the elections, Biden had even suggested or apparently suggested that he might be sympathetic to those who want to bring down Erdogan, the pro-democracy organizers who want to bring down Erdogan. And remember, he still hasn't made a phone call to Erdogan, although Turkey is a NATO ally for America. Nevertheless, there is also an indication that this US administration, Biden administration, wants to use Turkey constructively, but for Turkey's soft power, not hard power in the way Turkey has exercised in the former ISIS areas, in Syria, in Libya, and made a mess of a lot of things and left a lot of disaster in its wake. So these are two very interesting things. Now we'll tell you the four highlights because Blinken himself lists the 4 points on his agenda on how peace is to be arrived at in Afghanistan. So he says, first of all, that we will ask the UN to convene a meeting in Turkey of Russia, China, Iran, Pakistan, US and India. For the first time, formally India. That India will also sit on the same table. And frankly, if you ask me, even technically, cartography, this makes sense because India's official map, the map that you and I believe in India, that you and I have to swear by, that map has India and Afghanistan sharing a border through Wakhan corridor. We've spoken about it in a Katak letter in detail in the past. Also, India has a powerful presence in the neighborhood. India and Afghanistan have old traditional relationship, and a lot of the Afghan displaced people are living in India or studying in India or getting medically treated in India. India has also spent a lot of money and also, I think, a lot of moral support and a lot of manpower in Afghanistan to build the infrastructure, not just for quality of life, but also infrastructure for democracy. So India has been brought into this. So this 6-nation talks in Turkey to be hosted by Erdogan administration, and Erdogan is somebody Biden hasn't called yet. Second point is that Zalmay Khalilzad, who we have spoken about in the past, and at one point I also described him as a conflict entrepreneur, he has been retained by Biden administration from Trump. They've decided not to change him because, conflict entrepreneurs also can work from regime to regime. So he now is still leading the peace talks. So the second point is that Zalmay Khalilzad should now share with Ashraf Ghani, President Ghani, and the Taliban the new American proposals for a negotiated settlement to the Afghan situation, a negotiated settlement leading to permanent peace in Afghanistan. And the third point, that Turkey, once again Turkey, will hold another meeting, and this will be a meeting of top Taliban leaders and top Afghan government leaders. And in fact, Blinken's letter says that he would prefer it if Ghani himself attends it, but if it's not Ghani, it has to be someone fully empowered by him or somebody carrying his authority or his mandate. So these two meetings in Turkey sort of go side by side. Six-nation meeting of which India is a part, and this meeting between the top leaders of the Taliban and the Afghan government. Fourth, Blinken letter says the revised proposals will include a 90-day plan for reduction in violence to prevent a spring offensive by the Taliban. You know, snows are now beginning to melt slowly. Not quite yet. Winter lasts long in Afghanistan or large parts of Afghanistan. But another 2 weeks, snows will begin to thaw a little bit. And then when spring comes in, that is the time when big offensives are launched in Afghanistan. So if you work on this 90-day peace plan, you can avoid a big spring offensive by the Taliban. Now, it is the tone of this letter that's very interesting because it is a minister, a secretary of state, a cabinet level officer writing to a head of state. But look at this line. I'll read this line exactly to you. It says, I am making this clear to you so that you understand the urgency of my tone. Read my lips. So that you understand the urgency of my tone regarding the collective work outlined in this letter. So Blinken has said in this letter that America still remains committed to having last of its troops withdrawn by May 1, but he says all options are on the table, we are not ruling out anything. So to that extent, he is giving a hint to the Taliban that don't presume that no matter what happens, we'll cut our losses by May 1 and go away. That was Trump's line. So he in a way has put Taliban also in a little uncertainty, saying that we might just stay on. At the same time, this is almost rude tone and this reminder that, you know, watch my tone. Don't just listen to my words, listen to my tone, look at my face and look at my mood. That also tells you that he's putting Ghani and his government under pressure to settle on something and not to get caught up with prolonging this for too long, because Ghani also knows that any settlement would almost certainly mean an end to his government. So far, these talks which have been going on between the Taliban and the Ghani government, they've got stalled. They've got stalled over a couple of things. They've got stalled over, actually, when you don't have faith in each other, you can get stalled on anything. But in this case, prisoner exchanges, because both sides have prisoners of each other. Ghani's government says these are deadly terrorists. The other one says, but you are deadly mercenaries or whatever. So they are holding each other's prisoners, so they don't want to exchange them. And second is reduction in violence, because violence, if anything, while talks in Doha have gone on, violence in Afghanistan has gone up. In fact, even the violence against journalists has now become very, very prolific and very brutal. Just the other day, 3 women working for a media organizations were selectively targeted and assassinated. So terrible things are happening in Afghanistan. Now, this proposal was given out on Feb 28, and there is a story in the New York Times which I am sharing with you, because the Times NYT claims that they have got a copy of this proposal. It says, 1, that national elections will be held once a transitional peace government has been established in Afghanistan. Now, this is anathema to the Taliban, who see elections as a kind of Western toxification of the Afghan traditional system. So they don't like elections, but the first point in the proposal is that elections will be held after a provisional government. Second, that the new constitution and the new government, and this is very important, this will guarantee rights for women, ethnic minorities and both religious and ethnic minorities. As you know, there is a bunch of Hindus and especially Sikhs in Afghanistan as well. And there are Shias, Hazaras. So guaranteed rights for women, guaranteed rights for ethnic and religious minorities, a free press. Can you imagine Taliban and the free press? But they have to commit to it. All of these Taliban are opposed to, because Taliban wants to only bring in everything according to Islamic law. Taliban say that we believe in women's rights, but all under the Islamic law. And it was using the same Islamic laws that they had banished women from schools and colleges and workplaces when they were there the last time. There is no guarantee yet that they will not go back to those times. Number 3, very interesting point. And we had talked about the Doha peace talks and some significant attacks in Kabul at a university in our episode 609, of which I am sharing a link with you. Now, there we had mentioned to you that a big argument in Afghanistan is about the interpretation of Islamic laws and jurisprudence, because there are Shias and there are Sunnis and there are many schools and there are arguments, and arguments go on wherever there are scriptures and wherever there is religion, and wherever there is a law set in a religion. I mean, frankly, arguments also go on in constitutional states about interpreting the more modern constitutions, but these are things written more than 1,000 years ago. So for this, a High Council of Islamic Jurisprudence will be set up, a 15-member High Council of Islamic Jurisprudence. 7 members each will be named by the Taliban and the Afghan government, that's the Ghani government, and a 15th will be named by the president of the Afghan government. So 15-member council, what will it do? It will advise the Supreme Court of Afghanistan when it comes to complicated issues of interpretation of Islamic religious law. Once again, will the Taliban accept it? Because the other side will become 7+1. Point 4, following a similar process, they will set up a 15-member committee, 7+7+1, and this will be a joint commission to prepare the new constitution and also for joint monitoring of the ceasefire mechanism and implementation of the ceasefire and the new accord. Again, 7+7+1. And 5th, that the Taliban will have to remove all their personnel and all their military structures from neighboring countries. Now, neighboring countries is just a diplomatic euphemism for Pakistan, because there are no such structures in Iran, there are no such structures in Uzbekistan, China, India, anywhere. These structures are in Pakistan. Now, this is again something that neither the Pakistanis nor the Taliban would be happy to accept, at least not be willing to happily accept. So that is where we are. What Biden administration has done is they've hit the ground running. They've ensured continuity in policy by keeping Zalmay Khalilzad there, because it takes an Afghan, he's an ethnic Afghan of Afghan origin, it takes an Afghan to deal with fellow Afghans, or at least that seems to be the principle. They've got him working on it. They've thrown their weight behind the peace process. They've told the Taliban, we want to leave, but we are not going away in a hurry. We don't want you to occupy all of Afghanistan or make Ghani government's life impossible, because his army is now really weakened because of casualties and desertions. In fact, if you want to see the damage that Afghanistan has had since this government took over, it's almost like 50,000 of Afghan armies and police soldiers have been killed, nearly 50,000 civilians have been killed. Before that, we know the count of the alliance forces or coalition forces, 3,500 dead, many more injured, of which 2,300 of the dead were Americans. So this war has extracted a big toll. It's been America's longest war, and Americans want out. They don't want more casualties. At the same time, they don't want to leave Afghanistan back to the same old Taliban who have not broken off their contact either with Al-Qaeda or Islamic State, or with the same Taliban with their nexus with Pakistani army and ISI. So that is the challenge, and this is the big change that's taken place. So we thought we'll talk about it. So on this note, I conclude this episode of Cut the Clutter. Remember, this is 698. 2 days from now, we will have episode 700. So I want to do something special on that day. Please send me some ideas. And one thing that I know I can always count on you for is interesting, creative suggestions and ideas.